dear students of class 11th. I, Jyoti Grant here to take up your online English literature classes for the session 2020-21. First of all, I would like to congratulate and welcome all of you for being a student of Madharav Sandhya Public School, and I hope that you all and we teachers will work together and make this online teaching learning process a great success. We need to work hard, keeping in mind that the present scenario will not affect your study process. Let's pray and hope that everything will come to normalcy very soon. Till then, we will carry on with our studies intact. I know that studying online and getting up the lessons and making up the notes is quite challenging, but still we need to cope up with all these. And yes, it is rightly said that always walk through life as if you have something new to learn, and you will. The only person who is educated is the one who is learned how to learn and change. So let's begin our class with this new changed style of learning. First of all, I would like to tell you about the textbooks of English for class 11. We are following core course prescribed by CBSE, and we are having two textbooks. One is Hornbill, in which we do have total 8 chapters including the poems, and the other book is a snapshot, in which again we do have 8 chapters. Now students, the books might not be easily available to you, but not to worry. You can easily download the books and the chapters from the net. So I will be explaining the chapters and you listen to the explanations carefully, and then you can have a self-reading of the chapters so that it can develop a better understanding. So firstly, we shall take up lesson number 1 from your book Hornbill. The title of the chapter is The Portrait of a Lady by renowned author Khushwant Singh. So dear students, this is our lesson number 1, The Portrait of a Lady by Khushwant Singh. Now before we start the chapter, there are few expressions given in the beginning of the chapter, as you may see, and you need to infer their meaning from the context. Now the first one that is given here is, the thought was almost revolting, which means that the very idea was disgusting, something which is not matching up. The idea, the thought that is coming up is revolting in nature, and it is not matching up with the things. It is very hard to believe with the things. The second one is an expanse of pure white serenity, which implies that a vast area of untainted calm and tranquility, an area with perfect calmness, and an area which is completely at peace. The next expression that is given is a turning point. Now turning point implies to something that changed the usual course of events, a sudden change, you may say. The next expression that is given here and which is used in the content is, accepted her seclusion with resignation. Now here the meaning of this expression is that she accepted the fact of her being isolated, or she was prepared to accept the fact of being alone. The next expression is given, a veritable bedlam of chirpings, which means that there was an absolute confusion of twittering. There was a lot of noise creating disturbance and confusion of twittering. Next is frivolous rebukes, which means light-hearted scolding. And the last expression is the sagging skins of the dilapidated drum, which refers to the flabby casing of the drum that was worn out. Might be because the drum was not in use from the last long time, and that is why it was completely worn out. Now dear children, This story, The Portrait of a Lady, is a heartwarming pen picture of Khushwant Singh's grandmother who brought him up. The author describes his association with his grandmother and the changes that came about in their relationship with the passage of time. And he has beautifully described her simplicity and beauty left an inedible imprint on the poet's mind. So basically, this is what he has described in this chapter. Now, children, I have divided the chapter into few number of points, and in which firstly we shall talk about the author. So as I have already told you that this chapter is written by Khushwant Singh, who is undoubtedly one of the great Indian writers writing in English today. And he is not only a novelist but also a reputed journalist. He was born in 1915 and he had his education at Government College, Lahore. Then he went to England to study law, and when he came back, he did his practice at the Lahore High Court for some time. And during his course of study, he traveled widely and had wide exposure to life. Now, this story gives a very vivid account of author's relationship, Khushwant Singh's relationship with his grandmother, and it draws an accurate portrait of a grandmother. And that is why it is titled as The Portrait of a Lady. Lady here stands for his grandmother. So you may say it is a tribute to his grandmother who had a great influence on him. And the grandmother in the story is a universal figure of selfless love. Now we shall have a brief introduction of the chapter. Now it is already notified to you that it is a relationship which is shown here in the story, relationship of Khushwant Singh with his grandmother. Now it describes the various turning points in their relationship. Their friendship was most intimate when the author lived with his grandmother in the village. And when they moved to the city, the urban way of life and modern education in a convent school weakened the bond of their friendship. The author's realistic account makes us think of our own relationship with our grandparents. The grandmother in the story is, in fact, a universal figure of selfless maternal love. Now we shall move on to the quick summary of the chapter. Few points I have taken as the chapter is very long. So when you will have a self-reading of the chapter, you can relate these explanation of these points so that it can develop a better understanding to you. So when you will have a look on the chapter, the first few paragraphs, what is given there, that the author's memories of his grandparents is given there. And he has described his grandmother as a very old, short and fat lady with a wrinkled face. And she used to slightly bending her body when she walked with one hand on her waist. And she always wore a white dress, and most of the time she remained busy in telling the beads of her rosary, muttering inaudible prayers. In his further description, he has described his grandmother as a lady who is always draped in a white dress, and she appeared to be a picture of serenity. And it was really difficult for him to believe that once she had been a young and pretty lady. The portrait of the author's grandfather hung above the mantelpiece there in one of the rooms of the house, and with white flowing beard and a big turban and loose fitting clothes, he seemed 100 years old. So this shows that he had never seen his grandfather, only the picture that was hung on the wall. He had come to know his grandfather only through that picture or the portrait. Now, the next point is life in the village. What kind of a life he has been living with his grandmother there in the village. Now, in this, he has described that his parents left him with his grandmother when they moved to the city. The author and his grandmother became close friends, and she used to wake him up in the morning and get ready for school. Together, they used to go to the school which was attached to the temple. And while the author studied from the priest, his grandmother sat inside reading scriptures. And after the school, both walked back home feeding the dogs with stale chapatis, which the grandmother daily carried with her. Now, the next portion in the story is fading of friendship. Now, here what is happening that when the author's parents were comfortably settled in the city, he and his grandmother also moved to the city. The author now began to attend an English school. The grandmother could not help him in his studies, so their close friendship faded. The grandmother was unhappy because the author was not given religion based education. She withdrew herself into her seclusion, and she was shocked and pained when she learned that the author was being given lessons in music, because according to her, music was meant for harlots and beggars. And according to her, this was not the thing which should be learned by the gentlemen. Now, the next is snapping of friendship. Here, under this heading, we will find that when the author joined the university, now he has become young, schooling is done, and now he has started going to the university, and then he was given a separate room. The common link of friendship was snapped because earlier they were sharing the room. They were staying in a same room, but now when the author was given a separate room, so that common link of their friendship was also snapped. So the grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone, and from sunrise to sunset she sat by her wheel spinning and reciting prayers. Only in the afternoon she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. And it used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. When the author decided to go abroad, she was very, very upset. Still, she kept quiet, and she was not sentimental when she saw the author off at the railway station. She did not speak a word, only kissed his forehead. And the writer believed that this was their last physical contact, as he was going away for 5 years. Okay. The next is the last days. So when the author returned after 5 years, he was surprised to find the grandmother receiving him at the railway station, and there was no change in her appearance. The next day she collected the women of the neighborhood and got an old drum and began to sing. This shows that she was really, really happy. She was overwhelmed to have her grandson back to home. And she tired herself beating the old drum and singing old songs of the homecoming of warriors. She was so happy and excited that she skipped her prayers for the very first time in her life. And the next morning she fell ill. And she announced that her end had come. She stopped talking and lay peacefully in her bed, praying and telling her beads. And suddenly her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her hand. Now her friends, the sparrows, came and sat silently around her dead body. The author's mother fetched some bread, broke it into pieces and threw it to them, but the birds paid no attention to the crumbs. When the dead body was carried away for funeral, they flew away. Now the theme or the message that the chapter conveys, it doesn't have any explicit message. It only underlines the fact that the truly religious person is always calm and composed, kind-hearted and generous. Such a person was the author's grandmother. She was a thoroughly religious person. She had compassion and affection for all. She generously fed dogs and sparrows. The author also hints at the generation gap as he refers to his grandmother's objection to the absence of any teaching of scriptures in his New English school, and her particularly antipathy to the music. So basically, we find the three phases of author's relationship with his grandmother. First one is admiration and friendship. The author admired his grandmother and described her as the winter landscape in the mountains. And they were very good friends. And she was helping him out in getting up ready for the school. The next one is growing distant. She could not accompany him to school as he went by the school bus when they had shifted into the city, and he was now in an English school where they taught science and mathematics, and nothing was taught to him related to the religion.